If you've been thinking about making a switch to Fujifilm cameras because you've seen how popular cameras like the X100V are and how cool the photos that come from them look, and you want to get that kind of stylish point-and-shoot experience, you might have noticed how difficult it is to get your hands on a camera like the X100V or the X100VI. Well, today I've got an alternative that might just be as good as the X100V for potentially a lot less money. This is the Fujifilm X-E4, and it comes from the same generation of cameras as the X100V. It can do almost everything the X100V can, and maybe even a little bit more. So let's talk about this camera a little bit. First of all, let's talk about the specifications real quick. It has the same 26 megapixel X-Trans 4 sensor that the X100V does with no image stabilization. It has a base ISO of 160 to 12,800 and can extend the ISO as low as 80 and as high as 51,200. In continuous shooting, it can do up to 30 frames per second with a crop and up to 20 frames per second without a crop, but is rather limited in its buffer size, especially when you're shooting raw photos. So it's not a camera that is particularly suited for someone like an action photographer or that expects to shoot a lot of high-speed, fast-moving subjects. In terms of video, the specs are respectable, but they're nothing to write home about. It can do 4K up to 30 frames per second, 1080p up to 60, and one nice feature in the video is that it can do 1080p up to 240 frames per second in a slow motion mode. It also has a nice articulating LCD screen that is touchscreen and can actually flip up and out so that you can use this like a little vlogging camera if you so choose. Okay, so with that out of the way, is this camera a good alternative to the X100V? Let's start by talking about how these two cameras are similar. First of all, they have the exact same sensor, a 26 megapixel X-Trans 4 sensor. They come from the same generation, so a lot of Fujifilm cameras within this same generation had a lot of the same internal mechanics and shared the sensor across a lot of them. The X100V and the X-E4 is no exception. They're also very similar in terms of dimensions. While the X100V is a little bit larger and a little bit heavier because it has an integrated lens, physically, if you just look at the body dimensions, they actually are quite similar. Now, unless you're using one of Fuji's pancake lenses or a pancake lens from a third party, the X-E4 is going to wind up being quite a bit larger than the X100V once you put a lens on the front. They also share the exact same rear screen, a 3-inch 1.62 million dot touchscreen LCD, but interestingly enough, the X-E4 can get quite a bit brighter than the X100V. And no matter where I looked, I couldn't find a good explanation as to why this camera seems to have a brighter screen, although they have the same specifications. They both use the exact same battery and have a very similarly advertised battery life, although the X-E4 is advertised as having a slightly longer battery life. Not significantly so, but they just advertise a few more shots on a single battery for the X-E4 than on the X100V. Maybe it has something to do with lens versus no lens, but again, no real definitive answer on why there's that slight difference there. In terms of continuous shooting, they also have the exact same specifications for continuous shooting, although the X-E4 has a slightly larger buffer for some reason. As far as video goes, they have the exact same video specs, although the X-E4 can do up to 240 frames in that 1080p slow motion mode, while the X100V can only do up to 120 frames per second at 1080p. They both do this with a pretty significant crop. And finally, both cameras are aesthetically very similar. Both take a lot of their design cues from older rangefinder style film cameras, although there are some major differences there. So speaking of the differences, let's talk about how these two cameras are quite different. But before we talk about the differences between those two cameras, I want to talk about this real quick. This has become one of my favorite accessories and one of the most important things in my camera bag, and it's the INIU Cougar P63 external battery bank, a 25,000 milliamp hour battery bank that fits in the palm of your hand and is capable of powering multiple devices for a really, really long time. When I'm out on the trail somewhere shooting like I was with this video, having batteries and having power is incredibly important, especially when I'm using cameras like the XM5, which simply put, eat up a lot of battery really, really fast. Having this little power bank in my bag has allowed me to go on long shoots and not have to worry about whether or not I have enough batteries to last me that shoot. If my battery starts to get a little bit too low, I know that this power bank not only has enough juice to power my camera and any other accessories I might need for a really long time, but it also has up to 100 watts of power delivery, meaning in a pinch, I could even use it to power my MacBook Pro. Not only can you use this as a battery backup, you can also use it as a primary power source for your accessories when you're out on location. For example, lighting. In this shot, I was able to be out in the middle of Rocky Mountain National Park in pitch darkness with extremely bright lighting because I was able to hook this up to my lighting rig. And by attaching this to my lighting setup, not only was I able to have light in the middle of nowhere, but I could also simply pick it up and move it around. I didn't have to think about wires. I didn't have to think about whether or not I was gonna have a plug near me. All I needed to know was that I had one of these in my bag and I had lighting for hours and hours. The Cougar P63 also has 2 USB-C ports and 1 USB-A port and this handy little LCD screen that tells you the current power charge percentage. It comes in 6 different colors and you get a mesh carrying case as well as a USB-C cable so that you are ready to go right out of the box. So if you're tired of constantly worrying about battery life and you want to pick one up for yourself, I'm going to put some links in the description down below. All right, let's get back to the X-E4 now. The first major difference you're gonna notice is the fact that the X100V has an integrated lens. It's an integrated lens point and shoot style camera, whereas the X-E4 is an interchangeable lens camera and you can slap on pretty much any Fuji X-mount lens you want. The lens on the X100V is a 23mm f2 and I've got on the X-E4 a 23mm f2, although a significantly larger one than the one you'll find integrated onto the front of the X100V. While being able to change lenses on the X-E4 does give you a lot of versatility as far as shooting the right focal length for whatever situation you might find yourself in, it does add quite a bit of heft. You could theoretically throw on a super telephoto zoom lens to the X-E4 and it makes it an incredibly large and cumbersome camera. Or you can throw on something relatively small like this 23mm and get the same shooting experience and focal length as the X100IV, but it's still a bit difficult to put in your pocket. Another big difference is going to be the viewfinder. The X-E4 has a digital-only viewfinder, whereas the X100V has a hybrid optical and digital viewfinder. You can use the X100V using an actual rangefinder style viewfinder, and you can also switch it over to a digital one if you would like. That means you have all of the resolution of an optical one and the versatility of a digital one whenever you want it on the X100V. The X-E4, you only get the digital one. The viewfinder is also a bit higher resolution on the X100V. Another nice thing that's included on the X100V that isn't included in a lot of compact point and shoot style cameras is an integrated flash. And it's also something that's not present on the X-E4. So if you're someone that wants to replicate the style of harsh direct flash from disposable cameras, for example, the X100V can achieve those quite well. The X-E4, you can certainly do it, but you gotta buy an external flash. One major advantage for the X-E4 is going to be the low light performance. Simply put, you can put a brighter lens on the X-E4. You cannot make the lens on the X100V any brighter than f2. Now, in most situations, f2 is quite bright, and it's probably going to be bright enough for you. But if you find yourself in a dark alleyway or in a dimly lit reception hall, you may need something like an f1.7, which is going to give you a half a stop more light than f2. Or you can even go go so far as to use the 50mm f1 from Fujifilm that is going to give you a whopping 2 more stops of light, and that makes a significant difference. In terms of ergonomics, out of the box, the X100V is going to be a little bit better. The X-E4 by default has nothing in terms of a finger hold or a thumb grip. It's a very rectangular looking camera, which is great aesthetically, but not great ergonomically. The X100V does have a slight protrusion built in where your fingers would go to give it a bit more extra grip. So this point goes to the X100V. But many people for both cameras will add something like a thumb grip like I have here, or even an extra front finger hold like I have on my X-E4 as well. Adding both of those things allows both cameras to be much more comfortable to hold in your hand, especially for long periods of time, and still allow them to be quite compact. While both of these cameras share the same sensor and both lack in-body image stabilization, one major advantage of the X-E4 is the ability to use OIS lenses, or optically image stabilized lenses. In my opinion, optically stabilized lenses simply don't perform as well as good in-body image stabilization. So both of these cameras do lack in this area a little bit. But in a pinch, if you find yourself needing some kind of extra stabilization, you could use a lens with OIS built in on the X-E4. On the X100V, you're simply going to have to try to hold your hands more still or use a tripod. Let's talk about price real quick, because that's a very important question when you're comparing two cameras. The X100V is still trading very close to its $1,400 MSRP, sometimes even going for a bit more than its $1,400 original asking price. I've seen listings for X100Vs sell for as high as $1,800, and in a really good deal, I've seen them as low as $1,100, which if you can find one that's that cheap, I would 100% go for the X100V. But they mostly trade around $1,500, which is still a little bit more than their original MSRP. And that's considering the fact the newer version, the X106, is theoretically available. You can't get it brand new, but it is out there now. Now, if you compare that to the X-E4, which consistently trades around $900 to about $1,100 and as low as $800 in some instances, this is a far, far cheaper camera. If you wanted to take the same exact photos as the X100V could, but didn't care as much about portability and compactness, you could spend about $900 on the X-E4 body and around $300 for a 23mm f2, and you have the same focal length, the same maximum aperture, very aesthetically similar, and if you splurge a little bit on the square hood, it will still cost you less than a used X100V. You'll still have money left over for things like fun filters or extra battery. If you're someone that already owns Fujifilm lenses, the proposition of an X-E4 is even better because you can just use the lenses you already have. You don't have to go out and buy anything specific. Whereas if you're an existing Fuji user and you went out and got an X100V and you wanted to modify the lenses or the focal length at all, you could not use your existing lenses. You have to buy lens adapters and wide angle adapters or telephoto adapters to put on the front of your X100V. Effectively, you're buying a new kit if that's the case. So if you're an existing Fuji user, I do think it's actually a no-brainer if you're looking for the style of shooting or a easy, fun travel camera to go with the X-E4. So with all of that out of the way, we have one final question left, and that's, is the X-E4 as good or potentially better than an X100V? Ultimately, the answer to that question is going to be up to you. It's not one that I can realistically answer with any shred of accuracy. You're going to have to take into consideration what it is that you want out of a camera. Why is it that you're considering any Fujifilm at all if you're not an existing user? Are you looking to be able to shoot with film simulations and basically in-camera editing for your photos? If that's the case, quite frankly, any Fujifilm camera could do that quite well. Now, if you're looking for the compactness and the ability to travel very light but still capture incredible images, the X100V is a slightly better bet than the X-E4 will. But if you want to take the same quality of images, use the same film simulations, have the same rangefinder style shooting experience with the viewfinder over here on the left of the body, albeit a slightly digitized experience, the X-E4 gives you all of that. And it gives gives you the versatility to switch lenses when you need it. If you're looking to challenge your creativity a little bit and you want the restrictiveness that a point-and-shoot integrated lens camera offers you, you could go with the X-E4 and simply put on the 23mm f2 or any relatively wide lens of your choice and bring nothing else. You get the same shooting experience. If you get the 23mm, you get the same focal length and the same max aperture, but maybe slightly different lens characteristics, but you get the same overall shooting experience. But there's one thing that cameras like the X100V and all other integrated lens cameras will never allow you to do, and that's use the right focal length for every situation. With the X-E4, when I want it, I can have the same experience as the X100V. But when I need it, when I need to shoot portraits, when I need to shoot animals maybe, if I need to shoot cars, or I need to shoot something that requires a longer focal length, I have that option. I also have the option to go even wider for ultra-wide landscapes or vlogging. I have so much more versatility with the X-E4 than I would ever have with a camera like the X100V. So for that reason, and that reason alone, I think the X-E4 is even better than the X100V. But what do you think? Have you tried both cameras? Do you maybe own both cameras? And which one do you prefer more? If you've had the X-E4, what's your experience? If you've had the X100V, what's been your experience with that? I'd love to know in the comments down below. If you liked this video and found it helpful, please hit that like button. If you want to see more photography related content like this, please hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.